The Dallas Cowboys are approaching one of the most important off-seasons in recent memory. And while most of the attention has been placed on the upcoming draft and the idea of loading up on defensive talent, there's one problem that continues to stand out above everything else, and that's the linebacker position, because right now, if we're being honest, this team does not have a true leader in the middle of the defense. And that's not just a small issue, that's something that can completely define how far a team goes in a season, especially in today's NFL, where offenses are faster, smarter, and more explosive than ever before. And if you don't have someone who can read plays, communicate adjustments, and hold everything together in real time, things can fall apart very quickly. And that's exactly the situation Dallas is trying to avoid heading into 2026. Because as things stand today, the linebacker room is built around DeMarvion Overshown, Shamar James, and Justin Barron. And while each of those players brings something to the table, none of them has truly proven they can be that commanding presence, that defensive quarterback, that guy who takes control when things get chaotic. And that uncertainty is what makes this situation so dangerous, because the Cowboys are not a rebuilding team. They're trying to win now. They're trying to compete. And you cannot go into a season with a question mark at one of the most important positions on defense and expect everything to just work itself out. And what makes it even more frustrating is the fact that this isn't a new problem. This is something that has been building over time, because the Cowboys have had multiple opportunities in recent drafts to address the linebacker position in a major way, and they didn't take them, passing on players like Nakobe Dean, Devin Lloyd, and Quay Walker, all of whom had the potential to step in and become foundational pieces of the defense. And now those decisions are starting to come back into focus, because instead of having a developed, experienced linebacker entering his prime, Dallas is once again searching for answers. And that brings us to the biggest question of all, which is whether the Cowboys should wait until the 2026 NFL Draft to fix this issue. And the reality is that might be the worst possible approach they could take, because relying on a rookie linebacker to step in and immediately command a defense is extremely risky. It's one of the hardest transitions in football, not just physically, but mentally, because you're not just reacting to plays, you're responsible for understanding the entire offense, making adjustments, communicating with teammates, and executing at a high level from day one. And very few players could do that right away, which means if Dallas puts itself in a position where it has to draft a linebacker early and expect instant results, it's setting itself up for potential disappointment. And on top of that, going into the draft with such a clear and urgent need limits flexibility, because instead of being able to take the best player available, you're essentially forced into a decision. And that's when mistakes happen. That's when teams reach. That's when value is lost. And that's why the smarter move, the more calculated move, is to address the linebacker position before the draft even begins. And the good news for Dallas is that there are still options available. And not just any options, but experienced, proven veterans who could step in immediately and change the dynamic of this defense, starting with Patrick Queen, who represents the most aggressive and potentially impactful move the Cowboys could make. Because even though he's not currently a free agent, there have been discussions around the possibility of him being moved by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if that opportunity is real, Dallas should be paying very close attention, because Queen brings a level of durability and consistency that this defense desperately needs, having never missed a game in his career. And while he may not be the flashiest linebacker on every single play, he's the kind of player who does everything well, who raises the floor of the entire defense. And sometimes that's exactly what you need, not just highlight plays, but stability, reliability, and leadership. And if the price is something like a third or fourth round pick, that's a deal that could make a lot of sense for a team trying to win now. But if Dallas decides not to go the trade route, there are still veteran free agents who could fill that gap. And one of the most intriguing names on that list is Bobby Wagner, a player who has built a Hall of Fame-level career and somehow continues to produce even at this stage. And while age is obviously a factor, what Wagner brings goes beyond just physical ability. He brings experience, intelligence, and leadership, the kind of presence that can elevate an entire unit. And for a young linebacker group, having someone like that in the room could be invaluable, even if his role is more of a bridge while a younger player develops. And then you have players like Jermaine Pratt, who may not generate headlines, but consistently delivers solid performances. Someone who can step in, stop the run, make tackles, and provide exactly what Dallas needs without unnecessary risk. And that consistency is something this defense has been lacking. And in many ways, it might be exactly what stabilizes the middle of the field. And then there's Bobby Okereke, who represents more of a bounce-back candidate, a player who has shown high-level ability in the past, but is coming off a down season. And while that might scare some teams away, it could also create an opportunity for Dallas to get a talented player at a lower cost, betting on the idea that he can return to form in the right system. And finally, you have Shaq Thompson, another experienced veteran who may not be a long-term solution, but can contribute immediately, bringing versatility, leadership, and the ability to impact both the run and pass game. And when you look at all these options together, it becomes clear that the Cowboys are not without choices. The real challenge is making the right one, because this decision isn't just about filling a position. It's about defining the identity of a defense. It's about deciding whether this team is going to be aggressive and proactive or patient and reactive, and in a season where expectations are high and the margin for error is small. That choice could ultimately determine how far the Cowboys go. Because at the end of the day, the difference between a good defense and a great one often comes down to what happens in the middle. And right now, that's exactly where Dallas has the biggest question mark. And until they answer it, everything else remains uncertain. The conversation around the Dallas Cowboys doesn't stop at linebackers, because just when it seemed like the focus was locked in on fixing the middle of the defense, another storyline started to build. And this one had the potential to completely shake up everything we thought we knew about Dallas offseason plans, because suddenly there were whispers, reports, and quiet hints coming from around the league that a blockbuster move, one that had already failed once, might not be dead after all. And at the center of it all was one name that immediately grabbed attention, one of the most feared pass rushers in the NFL, Max Crosby, because just weeks ago, it looked like Crosby was gone, traded from the Las Vegas Raiders to the Baltimore Ravens in a massive deal that included 2 first-round picks, a price that told you exactly how valuable he is, exactly how dominant he can be when he's at his best. But then everything changed because that deal fell apart, abruptly rescinded after. Medical concerns raised red flags, specifically surrounding Crosby's knee after meniscus surgery. And just like that, one of the biggest trades of the offseason vanished, leaving Crosby back in Las Vegas, but not in the same situation as before, because now there's context, now there's tension, now there's the reality that the team was willing to move him. And that changes everything, because even if Crosby says he's happy, even if the Raiders publicly commit to moving forward together, the door is no longer fully closed, it's just slightly pushed open. And that's where the Cowboys enter the conversation again, because before Baltimore stepped in with that massive offer, Dallas was right there, seen as one of the top contenders to land Crosby. But they weren't willing to go as far as giving up 2 first-round picks, and that hesitation cost them. But now, with the original deal collapsed, there's been growing speculation that maybe, just maybe, the Cowboys could circle back this time with a more calculated, more conservative offer, trying to take advantage of a situation where Crosby's value might be complicated by health concerns and team dynamics. And for a moment, that idea created real excitement among fans, because adding a player like Crosby would instantly transform the Cowboys' defense, giving them a relentless, high-motor pass rusher who can take over games, who can pressure quarterbacks, disrupt defenses, and change outcomes in critical moments. But as quickly as that excitement started to build, reality began to settle in, because behind the scenes, the Cowboys had already made a decision. And it wasn't the one fans were hoping for, because instead of staying aggressive in the pass rusher market, instead of chasing another blockbuster move, Dallas pivoted, stepping away not just from Crosby, but from the entire idea of adding a star pass rusher through trades or free agency. And that decision became even clearer when they chose not to pursue players like Trey Hendrickson, another high-level pass rusher who could have filled a major need. And instead, they made a quieter, more controlled move, trading a future 4th-round pick for Rashawn Gary from the Green Bay Packers, a player who has shown flashes of elite pass-rushing ability, but has also dealt with inconsistency over the past few seasons. And that move tells you a lot about how the Cowboys are thinking right now. Because it's not about making the biggest splash. It's about managing risk. It's about finding value. And most importantly, it's about keeping their draft capital intact. Because according to reports, including insights from insiders like Calvin Watkins, the Cowboys are officially out on the Max Crosby situation. Even after the failed Baltimore deal reopened the conversation, and that's significant because it confirms that Dallas is committed to a different path, a path that leans heavily on the upcoming draft to address their remaining needs on the defensive line. And when you really break it down, that approach starts to make sense because as talented as Crosby is, there are real concerns that come with him right now. And those concerns start with his health, because knee issues, especially ones involving meniscus surgery, are not something teams take lightly, particularly when you're talking about giving up premium assets like first-round picks. And that's exactly where the Raiders are holding firm, because despite everything that's happened, despite the failed trade, despite the uncertainty, Las Vegas is not lowering their asking price. They still want that same massive return, and that creates a major problem for any team considering a move. Because now you're not just evaluating the player, you're evaluating the risk, the long-term durability, the possibility that you give up everything and then don't get the full version of the player you paid for. And that's a gamble that can set a franchise back years if it goes wrong. And it's exactly why teams, including the Cowboys, are hesitant to re-engage, because even though the idea of adding Crosby is exciting, even though the upside is undeniable, the downside is just as real. And for a team like Dallas that is trying to build sustainably, that is trying to balance immediate competitiveness with long-term stability, the kind of risk might simply be too much. And so, instead of chasing uncertainty, the Cowboys are choosing control, choosing patience, choosing to trust their ability to identify and develop talent through the draft. And that brings everything full circle, because whether it's a linebacker, pass rusher, or secondary help, the Cowboys are clearly signaling that the future of this team will be built through those picks, through smart decisions, through calculated risks rather than desperate swings. And while that approach may not generate the same level of excitement as a blockbuster trade, it might ultimately be what gives Dallas the best chance to build a complete, balanced, and sustainable contender. But of course, in the NFL, plans can change quickly, opportunities can appear out of nowhere, and until the draft is over and the season begins, nothing is ever truly final, which means that even if the Cowboys are out on Max Crosby today, the story might not be completely over. But for now, the message is clear. Dallas is moving forward with a different vision, one that prioritizes flexibility, discipline, and long-term success over short-term headlines. And whether that decision proves to be the right one is something we won't fully understand until the games begin. The verge of pulling off one of the biggest trades in recent NFL history, a blockbuster move for Max Crosby, the dominant pass rusher from the Las Vegas Raiders, a player who brings relentless energy, elite production, and a mindset that can completely transform a defense. But just when it seemed like the deal had real momentum, everything fell apart. And now the Cowboys are left facing a very different reality, one where they must pivot quickly and smartly if they want to stay competitive in a loaded NFC. Because the truth is, missing out on a player like Crosby is not just about losing talent. It is about losing an identity piece, someone who could have immediately become the face of the Cowboys defense, someone offenses would have to game plan around every single week. But the Raiders made their stance very clear. They wanted 2 first-round picks. And for Dallas, that price was simply too high, especially when you factor in Crosby's recent injury recovery, which adds an extra layer of risk to an already massive investment. And so instead of forcing a move that could hurt them long-term, the Cowboys made the difficult but calculated decision to walk away, and according to reports, they were devastated, which tells you just how serious they were about making that deal happen. But in the NFL, things change fast. And the best organizations are the ones that know how to adapt. And that brings us to a very intriguing alternative that is starting to gain traction, a potential trade for Minnesota Vikings linebacker Jonathan Greenard. A move that may not carry the same headline power as a Crosby deal, but could quietly be one of the smartest decisions Dallas makes this offseason. Because unlike the Crosby situation, this is not about overpaying for a superstar. This is about finding value, balance, and flexibility. And the proposed trade scenario really highlights that strategy, with the Cowboys sending their number 20 pick along with picks 92 and 218 to Minnesota in exchange for pick 32, pick 82, and Greenid himself. And when you really break that down, it becomes clear that this is not just a player acquisition. It is a calculated reshaping of draft capital, because moving from pick 20 to 32 still keeps Dallas in the first round, which is incredibly important for contract control and long-term planning, while also moving up in the third round from 92 to 82, giving them a better position to add another impactful player. And on top of that, they land a proven defensive contributor in Greenid, who, when healthy, has shown the ability to consistently pressure quarterbacks and disrupt opposing offenses, recording 25 sacks across the 2023 and 2024 seasons, which is no small feat in today's NFL. But of course, this move is not without its risks, because injuries have been a concern, particularly during the 2025 season where his production dipped, raising questions about durability and long-term reliability. And then there's the contract situation, as Greenid is currently under a 4-year, $76 million deal that runs through 2027, but reports indicate that he is looking for a new contract, meaning any team that trades for him must be prepared to negotiate and potentially commit even more financially, which creates an interesting dilemma for the Cowboys front office. Do they see Greenid as a long-term cornerstone worth investing in, or is he simply a short-term piece to strengthen the rotation? And that decision will ultimately define how successful this move could be. But what makes this situation even more compelling is how it reflects the Cowboys' overall approach to team building. Because missing out on Crosby could have easily pushed them into desperation mode, leading to reckless decisions, or overpaying for lesser talent. But instead, they appear to be taking a more measured path, focusing on depth, versatility, and maintaining future assets. And that is something that often separates good teams from great ones, the ability to stay disciplined even when a big opportunity slips away. And if this trade for Greenid does happen, it would not be about replacing Crosby one for one, because that is simply not realistic. It would be about creating a more balanced defensive unit, one that relies on multiple contributors rather than a single superstar. And in many ways, that could make the Cowboys more unpredictable and harder to game plan against, especially if their young players continue to develop alongside experienced veterans, creating a rotation that keeps players fresh and maintains consistent pressure throughout the game. And while fans may initially feel disappointed that the team did not land a player of Crosby's caliber, it is important to understand the bigger picture, because giving up 2 first-round picks is not just a short-term sacrifice. It is a long-term gamble that can impact a franchise for years. And the Cowboys clearly were not willing to take that risk, which suggests a level of discipline that has not always been associated with this organization. And that alone could be a sign of growth within the front office. But the question still remains, is this the right move? Is pivoting to someone like Greenid enough to elevate this defense to the next level, or will the absence of a true elite pass rusher continue to hold them back in critical moments? And that is something we will only be able to answer as the season unfolds, because on paper, this looks like a smart, calculated decision. But football is not played on paper. It is played on the field, where health, chemistry, and execution ultimately determine success. And for the Cowboys, this offseason may not be defined by the move they did not make, but rather by how well they respond to it, because sometimes the best decisions are not the flashy ones that dominate headlines, but the quieter moves that build a stronger, more complete team over time. And if Jonathan Greenid can stay healthy and perform at the level he has shown in the past, this could end up being one of those moves that people look back on and say, this is where the Cowboys made the right call, even if it did not feel like it at the moment. Since 2008, Dallas holds 2 first-round picks, sitting at number 12 and number 20 overall, and that kind of draft capital brings not only opportunity, but also pressure, because getting these selections right could define the next era of Cowboys football. And internally, the organization understands exactly what is at stake, with key decision-makers like McClay emphasizing just how crucial this moment is, pointing out that having 2 first-round picks gives Dallas the flexibility to reshape the roster, address major weaknesses, and build a stronger, more complete team. especially after a disappointing defensive season that saw the Cowboys struggle in multiple areas, including giving up over 30 points per game, one of the worst marks in the league. And when you look at the direction of recent mock drafts from top analysts, a very clear theme begins to emerge. The Cowboys are heavily expected to focus on defense, particularly in the secondary and along the defensive front, and it all starts with the 12th overall pick, where different analysts have very different visions for what Dallas could do. With Dane Brugler projecting a somewhat unexpected choice in Mansour Delane, a cornerback out of LSU, a player known more for his instincts and awareness than elite physical traits, someone who excels in both man and zone coverage, showing the ability to anticipate routes and make plays on the ball, which could be exactly what Dallas needs as they try to stabilize a secondary that has been inconsistent. While other analysts like Lance Zierlein see a completely different direction, linking Dallas to Keldrick Falk, a powerful edge rusher from Auburn, a player with impressive size and versatility who can line up on the edge or slide inside, offering flexibility along the defensive line. And even though his 2025 production may not jump off the page, the upside is undeniable, making him a classic high-ceiling pick that teams often fall in love with. And then there are analysts like Joel Klatt who believe the Cowboys should go in a completely different direction altogether by selecting Caleb Downs, the standout safety from Ohio State, a player widely regarded as one of the best defensive prospects in the entire draft, someone who has the ability to completely transform a defense with his intelligence, range, and playmaking ability, and despite concerns about positional value. Klatt makes it clear that this is not a player Dallas should overthink, especially considering how badly the defense struggled last season. And when you shift to the 20th overall pick, the possibilities become just as interesting, because this is where Dallas could either double down on a position or continue to spread talent across multiple areas, with players like Avion Terrell from Clemson showing up in multiple projections, a physical and competitive cornerback who brings toughness and energy to the secondary, something the Cowboys desperately need, while others like Jordan Reed suggest that Dallas could get aggressive by trading down and targeting players like Dylan Thiemann, a safety from Oregon who has been rising up draft boards thanks to his elite athletic testing, including blazing speed and explosive jumping ability, combined with strong instincts and versatility, making him a perfect fit for modern defensive schemes that rely heavily on two high safety looks. And what makes this scenario even more compelling is the idea that Dallas could double dip in the secondary, adding both Thiemann and Terrell to completely reshape the back end of the defense in one single draft. A bold strategy that could pay off immediately if both players develop as expected. And then there are trade scenarios that add another layer of intrigue, with some projections having Dallas move down from 20 to pick 25 in a deal with the Chicago Bears, selecting Colton Hood, another aggressive cornerback known for his physical style and willingness to contribute in run defense, while also gaining additional draft capital, which could be used to address other needs across the roster. And when you take a step back and look at all these possibilities, one thing becomes very clear: the Cowboys are in a position of rare flexibility. They can stay put and take the best players available. They can trade up for a difference maker, or they can trade down and accumulate more assets. And that kind of optionality is exactly what teams dream of having during the draft, but also means there is no margin for error, because with 2 first-round picks, expectations are doubled. Fans are watching closely, and every decision will be scrutinized, especially for a franchise like Dallas that is constantly under the national spotlight. And ultimately, this draft could come down to one simple question: do the Cowboys prioritize immediate impact or long-term upside? Do they go after polished players who can contribute right away, or do they take swings on high-ceiling prospects who may take time to develop but could become stars in the future? And whichever path they choose, one thing is certain: the 2026 NFL Draft will play a massive role in shaping the identity of this team moving forward. Because whether it is a shutdown corner, a dominant edge rusher, or a playmaking safety, the Cowboys need difference makers. They need players who can change games, and most importantly, they need to get these picks right, because opportunities like this do not come around often. And what Dallas does with picks 12 and 20 could ultimately determine whether this team remains stuck in mediocrity or finally takes that next step toward true contention. Dallas has made some moves this offseason, but the depth and long-term stability at linebacker still raise serious questions. With the 2026 NFL Draft still weeks away, the Cowboys front office could still explore several options to improve the unit, either through free agency or potential trades. Cowboys fans know that linebacker has been a position that fluctuated throughout the past few seasons. Injuries, inconsistency, and roster turnover have made it difficult for Dallas to maintain a stable core in the middle of the defense. Even with stars on the defensive line and in the secondary, the linebacker group often determines whether a defense can truly dominate. That's why speculation is growing that Dallas could still target veteran help before the draft. Let's start with the top remaining free agents the Cowboys could consider. One intriguing name still available is Bobby Okereke. Okereke has quietly become one of the most reliable linebackers in the league over the past few years. Known for his tackling ability, range, and leadership, he could immediately step into a starting role in Dallas. The Cowboys' defense thrives on speed and playmaking, and Okereke's sideline-to-sideline ability would fit nicely into that system. Another veteran who always seems to draw interest is Bobby Wagner. Even late in his career, Wagner continues to produce at an elite level. The future Hall of Famer brings unmatched leadership, experience, and football IQ. While he may not have the same speed he once did, his ability to diagnose plays and command a defense could be extremely valuable for a team with championship aspirations like the Cowboys. Then there's longtime Buccaneers leader Lavonte David. David has been one of the most underrated linebackers of the past decade. His versatility allows him to cover tight ends, rush the passer, and stop the run effectively. If Dallas is looking for a veteran who can still perform at a high level while mentoring younger players, David could be an excellent fit. A slightly younger option is Jermaine Pratt, who has developed into a dependable linebacker with strong tackling and coverage ability. Pratt could provide stability in the middle of the Cowboys' defense and might still have several productive years ahead of him. Another experienced name worth watching is Shaq Thompson. Thompson has been a consistent playmaker when healthy and has the athleticism to thrive in modern defensive schemes. If the Cowboys want a linebacker who can contribute in both run defense and pass coverage, Thompson could be a smart addition. There are also several rotational options that could help strengthen Dallas' depth. Elandon Roberts is known for his physical run defense and leadership. Jahlani Tavai has carved out a role as a tough, versatile linebacker who can contribute on multiple downs. And Jerome Baker brings speed and coverage ability that could help Dallas match up against modern passing offenses. Veterans like Eric Kendricks, Logan Wilson, and Kenneth Murray also represent potential options depending on how the market develops. Kendricks has long been one of the league's smartest linebackers. Wilson is known for his playmaking instincts, and Murray offers athletic upside that some teams still believe could be unlocked in the right system. However, free agency may not be the only path the Cowboys explore. There is also the possibility that Dallas looks toward the trade market to find a solution. One fascinating trade target is Patrick Queen of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Queen has developed into a dynamic linebacker capable of making plays all over the field. His speed and aggressiveness would perfectly match the Cowboys' defensive philosophy. If Pittsburgh were willing to move him, Dallas could view him as a long-term answer. Another intriguing option is Jordan Brooks from the Miami Dolphins. Brooks is known for his tackling production and athletic ability. He's the type of linebacker who can rack up tackles while also contributing in coverage and blitz packages. The Cowboys could also look at Pete Werner from the New Orleans Saints. Werner has quietly become one of the most consistent linebackers in the league. His ability to diagnose plays and make quick decisions could be extremely valuable for Dallas defense. Another player who could draw interest is T.J. Edwards of the Chicago Bears. Edwards is a tackling machine and one of the most dependable run defenders in the NFL. While he may not be flashy, his reliability could help stabilize the Cowboys' linebacker unit. Two additional names to watch include Tyrel Dodson and Dee Winters. Dodson has shown flashes as a productive linebacker, while Winters represents a younger option with developmental upside. Ultimately, the Cowboys' decision could come down to timing. With the 2026 NFL Draft approaching, the front office must determine whether to address linebacker immediately or wait for young talent in the draft class. Some analysts believe Dallas could combine both strategies, adding a veteran for short-term stability while drafting a linebacker to develop for the future. What's clear is that the Cowboys cannot ignore this position if they want to compete for a championship. A strong linebacker core is essential for stopping the run, defending against tight ends, and maintaining balance in a modern NFL defense. As free agency continues to unfold and trade rumors heat up, Cowboys fans should keep a close eye on the linebacker market. Whether it's a veteran signing, a surprise trade, or a draft pick, Dallas still has multiple paths to strengthen the heart of its defense. And if the Cowboys make the right move, this defense could become even more dangerous heading into the 2026 season. What many considered a dream rotation. Leading the group was Osa Odigizwa, a player Dallas had just rewarded with a massive 4-year contract worth $80 million. Odigizwa had developed into one of the most reliable interior pass rushers in the league, bringing quickness, disruption, and consistent pressure from the inside. But he wasn't alone. Dallas also made a huge move by acquiring Kenny Clark from the Green Bay Packers. Clark had long been one of the league's most respected defensive tackles, known for his strength at the point of attack and ability to collapse the pocket. Then, in another blockbuster move, Dallas traded for Quinnen Williams from the New York Jets. At that moment, analysts across the league agreed on one thing. The Cowboys had the most expensive and possibly the most talented defensive tackle rotation in football. All three players were earning more than $20 million per season. The expectation was simple. Quarterbacks would have nowhere to step up in the pocket. Running backs would struggle to find gaps. And opposing offensive lines would be overwhelmed by the sheer power and depth of Dallas' interior defense. But then something changed. A new defensive scheme changes everything. The biggest shift came when Dallas began transitioning to a 3-4 defensive scheme. This change dramatically altered the way defensive linemen were used. In a traditional 4-3 defense, interior defensive tackles like Odigizwa often play as penetrating disruptors. Their job is to attack gaps, get into the backfield, and pressure the quarterback. But in a 3-4 system, the responsibilities can be very different. Instead of simply attacking, defensive linemen often need to occupy blockers, control gaps, and allow linebackers to make plays. For certain players, that transition is seamless. For others, it's not an ideal fit. In this case, Odigizwa was expected to move into a 4-eye alignment, a position that lines up on the inside shoulder of the offensive tackle. While he certainly has the talent to adapt, many within the organization reportedly believed he was not the best schematic fit for the new system. That's when the trade conversations began, and eventually, the Cowboys decided to pull the trigger. The trade that shocked fans. The decision to trade Osa Odigizwa to the San Francisco 49ers caught many fans off guard. After all, this was a player the Cowboys had just invested heavily in. But when teams change schemes, roster priorities often shift dramatically. Dallas already had Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams anchoring the interior. With a new defensive philosophy in place, the front office may have believed Odigizwa was the most logical player to move. Still, the trade leaves a major problem. The Cowboys suddenly need a starting-caliber defensive tackle, and the timing couldn't be worse. Free agency options are disappearing. The free agent market for defensive tackles has been shrinking quickly. Several of the best available veterans have already signed with new teams. Among them are players like Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Deshaun Hand. One by one, these players have disappeared from the market, leaving the Cowboys with fewer and fewer options. And now, one name stands out above the rest. The veteran who refuses to slow